Chapter 1. The Origins of the Legend. In the shadowed heart of medieval Germany lay the town of Hamelin, nestled between dense forests and winding rivers. This was a time when the line between reality and myth blurred under the moonlit sky, when whispers of spirits and dark enchantments drifted like mist through the cobbled streets. Hamelin's charm lay in its simplicity: quaint homes with slanted roofs, markets bustling with vendors, and children's laughter echoing through the narrow alleys. Yet beneath the quaint flood, a darkness loomed, waiting for a crack to slip through. It was the year 1284, a time when fear held sway over reason. People lived by the cycles of the seasons, and every misfortune was a sign of something greater, perhaps a curse, perhaps a blessing in disguise. The town's troubles began innocuously enough. A few rats spotted darting through the food stores, nibbled grains, and chewed leather straps. The townsfolk dismissed them at first, believing they could handle the pests as they always had. But the rats multiplied, scuttling out of the shadows by the hundreds. They swarmed through the streets like a living tide, gnawing through wooden beams, spoiling food, and biting those who dared cross their paths. The people began to speak of ill omens, wondering what sin had called such a plague upon their town. It wasn't long before whispers spread of dark magic or a curse cast by a vengeful spirit. The air grew thick with dread, as if the very town held its breath, waiting for something terrible to unfold. In desperation, the town council gathered in the church, its stained glass windows casting eerie colors over the anxious faces. The mayor, a stout man whose confidence had dwindled with each new rat sighting, stood at the front, his voice strained as he addressed the townspeople. "We must find a solution. A reward for anyone who can rid us of this plague," he declared, desperation sharpening his voice. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Many had little hope that anyone could save them now. Yet, as if in answer to their despair, a stranger arrived in Hamelin the very next day. He appeared at dawn, walking through the morning mist that clung to the town like a shroud. He wore a long coat stitched with patches of bright colors: reds, yellows, and greens, colors that seemed to shimmer like a mirage. But his face was hidden beneath the brim of a wide hat, casting a shadow over his features. Only his eyes gleamed from the darkness, cold, distant, and ancient, as if they had seen things beyond the grasp of mortal minds. He called himself the Pied Piper. His voice was like a serpent's whisper, smooth and insistent, slipping into the thoughts of those who heard him. When he spoke to the mayor, the council, and the townspeople gathered in the square, his words seemed to weave through the air like the notes of a song. "I can rid you of your burden," he said, his lips curling into a smile that did not reach his eyes. "But it will cost you. My price is 1,000 gold coins." The town's leaders hesitated. 1,000 gold coins was a fortune, especially for a town already brought low by the rats. But the piper's words held a strange allure, a promise that wrapped around their hearts and squeezed. "Agree to my terms, and by nightfall, the rats will be gone," the piper promised. His hands caressed the wooden flute tucked into his belt, fingers moving over it like a lover's touch. "But betray me, and you will wish you had never heard my tune." Desperation dulled caution, and with little choice, the town's leaders agreed to the bargain. As the contract was sealed, the air grew colder, a shiver running through those who stood closest to the piper. He bowed low, his movements fluid, almost unnatural, and turned away from the crowd. The sun dipped below the horizon, and shadows stretched long across the streets. As twilight bled into night, the piper stepped into the center of Hamelin. He brought the flute to his lips and began to play a melody that twisted through the air, notes bending in ways that seemed to tangle with reality itself. It was a tune that spoke of hidden places and ancient secrets, of promises broken and debts yet to be paid. The sound drifted into the alleys, seeped through the walls, and slithered into the dark corners where the rats had made their nests. It called to them, luring them out like a hunter's call, and one by one, they emerged, eyes glinting in the moonlight, whiskers twitching as they followed the piper's steps. Hundreds, then thousands, swarmed into the streets, flowing behind the piper like a living river of darkness. The townsfolk watched in awe and horror from their windows, afraid to step outside as the piper led the rats through the streets, past the town gates, and down to the banks of the river Weser. The rats, entranced by the piper's tune, plunged into the waters and disappeared beneath the surface. When the last ripple faded, the piper stood alone by the river, the moon casting his shadow long and thin across the water's edge. Hamelin breathed a sigh of relief, but the silence that followed felt more like a wound than a blessing. The piper returned to the town square, where the mayor and council awaited him. His smile widened, a sliver of moonlight catching the edges of his teeth. "Your town is free of the rats, as I promised," he said, his voice carrying in the stillness. "Now pay what is owed." But greed is a stubborn seed, and in their relief, the town's leaders began to doubt the piper's power. Why pay a fortune for a task that seemed so simple? They offered him a lesser sum, thinking him too much the outsider to cause trouble. The piper's smile faded, and a shadow crossed his face, a darkness that seemed to seep into the air around him. "You have broken our bargain," he said, each word like a chill wind that swept through the square. "And so, you will pay a different price." With that, he turned and disappeared into the night, leaving only the echo of his footsteps and a chill that sank into the bones of those who had wronged him. Yet the townspeople dismissed his threat, thinking him a mere trickster who could do no more harm. But as dawn approached, a sense of unease settled over Hamelin. It was as if the town itself knew that a darkness had been unleashed, a darkness that would not be satisfied until its debt was paid in full. Chapter 2, The Vanishing Light. Morning broke over Hamelin, but the light seemed to struggle against an unseen weight. The sun's warmth was muted, like the sky was veiled in mourning. The townsfolk awoke, hoping to find their town return to its former peace, free of the gnawing anxiety the rats had brought. But as they stepped outside, they noticed an eerie stillness in the air, a silence that wrapped around the town like a suffocating shroud. The village square, usually filled with the shouts of merchants and the laughter of children, was empty. As the mayor and town council made their way to the square, they called out to the townspeople, but no one answered. Doors stood ajar, rocking gently in the morning breeze. The councilmen's voices echoed off the stone walls, bouncing back at them, hollow and unreturned. An unsettling chill settled over the men. The council searched door to door, calling out for their families, their neighbors, anyone. But with each house they checked, their fear deepened, until they could no longer deny the truth that clawed at the edges of their minds. The children were gone. Every child in Hamelin, from the youngest babe to those just shy of adulthood, had vanished without a trace. Panic spread through the town like wildfire. Mothers fell to their knees, wailing for their lost children, while fathers pounded on empty doors, desperate for answers. The streets that had been overrun by the rats now echoed with the anguished cries of parents, each scream tearing through the air like a wound. The piper's parting words rang in their ears, a mocking reminder of their broken promise. The elders gathered in the square, fear and regret twisting their features as they realized what they had done. The mayor's face, pale and drawn, seemed to age years in those few minutes. He clutched at his robes, his eyes darting to every shadow, as if expecting the piper to emerge from them. "This must be his doing," he muttered, voice thick with dread. "He has taken our children as payment." Whispers of the piper's curse spread like poison among the townsfolk. Some spoke of seeing shadows move in unnatural ways, of hearing faint music in the wind that twisted through the empty streets at night. Others swore they saw ghostly shapes flitting just beyond the edge of sight, figures that looked like children but moved with a natural silence. Desperate, the mayor and his council sent riders to neighboring towns, hoping to find their lost children or any sign of the piper. But each rider returned with the same grim news. No one had seen or heard of the missing children or the strange man with the colorful coat. Days turned into weeks, and hope turned to despair. The once prosperous town of Hamelin withered. The marketplace, where children had once played among the stalls, fell silent. Without the laughter of the young, the town seemed to lose its spirit, and a creeping cold settled over Hamelin, even in the heat of summer. It was then that the nightmares began. Parents tossed and turned in their beds, plagued by dreams of their children wandering through endless forests, their faces pale and blank, eyes wide with terror, as they reached out for help that would never come. Some claimed they heard whispers in the night, small voices carried on the wind, calling out for mothers and fathers. But when they woke, they found only the emptiness of their darkened homes. The nightmares spread like a fever, driving some to madness. A few even claimed to see the piper himself, standing in the shadows of the forest that bordered the town, his hat pulled low, and his flute gleaming in the moonlight. They said he would stand still as a statue, waiting, watching, as if mocking their helplessness. The most desperate of the townsfolk began to leave offerings at the edge of the forest, bread, gold, trinkets, hoping to appease the piper, to beg for their children's return. But each morning the offerings lay untouched, and the silence in the town only deepened, as if the very earth had turned against them. Rumors spread that the town was cursed, that the piper had made a bargain not with men, but with something far older and darker that dwelled in the woods. Some claimed the children had been taken into the underworld, into a realm where time moved differently, where the piper played his haunting tune for eternity. Others whispered that the piper himself was a creature from beyond the veil, a spirit of vengeance sent to collect on broken promises. The town's priests spoke of divine punishment, urging the townsfolk to repent, to cleanse themselves of the sins that had brought the piper's wrath. But the townspeople's faith was a flickering candle against the growing darkness. Every prayer felt unanswered, every plea for mercy lost in the void that seemed to surround Hamelin. In their despair, a small group of parents ventured into the forest one moonless night, armed with lanterns and the last of their courage. They followed the whispers that seemed to drift through the trees, the faint echo of a flute that they could barely hear. The forest closed in around them, branches twisting like gnarled fingers, the darkness pressing against their lantern light. They wandered deeper than any had dared before, into a part of the woods where the air grew cold and thick, where the ground beneath their feet felt wrong, as if they walked on the skin of a living thing. But when they reached the source of the sound, they found only an empty clearing, with a single wooden flute lying in the grass, its surface cold and polished, untouched by time. The parents returned to Hamelin, their minds broken by what they had seen, or perhaps what they had not seen. They could not speak of what had happened, but those who saw their faces understood that hope had died that night, buried somewhere deep in the forest, along with the children's laughter. From that day on, no one spoke of the piper aloud. The townsfolk tried to go about their lives, but the loss hung over Hamelin like a black cloud. The town's gates were sealed at dusk, and the streets emptied long before the sun sank below the horizon, as if the darkness might bring the piper back again. Yet, on certain nights, when the wind howled through the trees, the townsfolk swore they heard it, the faint, distant melody of a flute drifting from the forest's edge, a reminder of a debt unpaid and a promise that still lingered, waiting to be fulfilled. Chapter 3. Whispers in the Woods. The chill of autumn settled over Hamelin, the leaves turning crimson and gold, but the town felt anything but warm. The days grew shorter, and the nights seemed to stretch endlessly, each hour echoing the absence of laughter that had once filled the streets. The townspeople moved like shadows, their faces etched with sorrow, their eyes haunted by memories of the children who had vanished into the night. Among those still lingering in the town was an old woman named Greta, a wise figure known for her knowledge of folklore and the supernatural. In her youth, she had told many tales of the mysterious and the strange, but even her stories had grown heavy with sadness since the piper's curse had darkened Hamelin. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the shadows deepened, A group of desperate parents gathered in her small cottage, seeking solace and perhaps answers. Greta sat by the flickering fire, her gnarled hands weaving a tapestry of tales that had been passed down through generations. As she spoke, her voice trembled with both fear and conviction. There are forces in this world far beyond our understanding, she warned, her eyes glinting in the dim light. The Piper is not just a man but a harbinger of fate, a collector of souls bound by sorrow and loss. We must remember the legends of old if we are to find our children. She recounted the story of the fairy ring, where children were lured away by enchanting music only to disappear forever. Many have danced in that circle, believing they would return, she murmured, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. But the music calls them deeper into the woods, where they are never seen again. We must tread carefully, for the Piper holds the same allure. The parents listened intently, fear and hope intertwining in their hearts. Greta urged them to be vigilant, to watch for signs in the woods, for the whispers of the lost might guide them to their children. But be warned, she cautioned, the deeper you venture, the more perilous the journey becomes. With her words echoing in their minds, the group decided they would brave the forest together, united in their desperate quest to reclaim what had been taken. They gathered lanterns and provisions, but a palpable sense of dread hung in the air. As twilight descended, they set forth, their hearts pounding in unison, the flickering light of their lanterns casting long shadows on the gnarled trees. The forest was dense and oppressive, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. Each step they took seemed to amplify the silence, as if the woods themselves held their breath in anticipation. They followed a narrow path, the lantern light revealing twisted roots and creeping vines, but the deeper they went, the more the path began to shift, leading them astray. Suddenly, a soft melody broke through the silence, a tune both haunting and familiar, tugging at their hearts. It swirled around them, weaving through the trees like a specter. The parents exchanged worried glances, remembering Greta's words. "This is it," one whispered, voice trembling. "We must stay together." Yet, as they moved further into the woods, the music seemed to draw them in, beckoning them with promises of joy and reunion. Shadows danced at the edge of their vision, figures that looked like children, their forms shifting and ethereal, gliding just beyond the reach of the lantern light. "Is it them?" Another parent gasped, hope rising in their chest. But as they pressed on, they found themselves enveloped in a thick fog that crept from the ground, swallowing the light and distorting their senses. The music grew louder, a cacophony of laughter and weeping intertwined, a dissonance that echoed the conflict in their hearts. Were these the lost children, or was it merely a trick of the Piper's design? They stumbled through the mist, desperate to follow the voices, but soon became disoriented. The woods seemed to shift, the trees closing in around them like a tightening noose. Panic surged as the realization dawned they were lost. The familiar path had vanished, leaving them stranded in an alien world, a place where the rules of time and space held no sway. Suddenly, the music ceased. Silence fell like a heavy blanket, smothering their cries and muffling their fears. It was then that a shadow emerged from the darkness, the form of a man clad in a vibrant coat, his eyes glinting with a predatory gleam. The Piper stood before them, his flute resting at his side, a sly smile playing on his lips. "Welcome," he said, voice smooth as silk but laced with an underlying malice. "I see you've come searching for your little ones. They are so delightful, aren't they? Full of laughter, joy, and endless potential." His gaze flickered toward the woods, as if relishing a memory of the children's innocent mirth. "We demand our children," one parent cried, stepping forward, but the words came out more as a plea than a command. "Bring them back. You have no right to keep them." The Piper chuckled softly, a sound like rustling leaves. "Ah, but you made the choice to forsake them," he said, gesturing with an elegant sweep of his hand. "In your greed, you sealed their fate. And now they dance and play in the land of shadows, forever free of the burdens you placed upon them. The parents recoiled, fear gripping their hearts. "No!" they shouted in unison. "We will not let you take them. We will find a way to rescue them. But at what cost?" The piper replied, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "What are you willing to sacrifice for your precious children? It's never so simple, is it?" The fog thickened, swirling around them, and the parents felt their resolve wavering as the weight of despair settled in their chests. The darkness whispered their doubts, feeding on their fears. They were trapped in a nightmare, and the piper was the puppeteer, dancing upon their strings. With a wave of his hand, he summoned the mist, and for a moment, visions of the children flitted before their eyes. They saw their laughter, felt their tiny hands grasping at shadows, and heard their voices calling out, echoing in the depths of the forest. But just as quickly, the visions faded, leaving only the echo of their absence. In that moment of despair, one parent, a mother named Elara, stepped forward, trembling but resolute. "You may have taken them from us, but you will not break us," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "We will return. We will not stop searching until we bring them home." The piper's smile faltered for just a heartbeat, and in that flicker of uncertainty, Elara saw a glimpse of the man beneath the monster. But just as quickly it vanished, replaced by a facade of laughter. "Then come back, my dear," he replied, voice smooth but edged with malice. "Come back when the time is right. I will be waiting." With a wave of his hand, the shadows surged around them, pulling at their clothes and tugging at their hearts, threatening to drown them in despair. The parents screamed, their cries lost in the suffocating darkness, and in an instant they were gone, returned to the familiar landscape of Hamelin, but forever altered. As they stood at the edge of the forest, the town stretched before them, silent and empty, the echoes of the piper's laughter lingering in the air like a haunting melody. Hope flickered dimly, a candle fighting against the suffocating darkness that threatened to engulf their hearts. Greta awaited them at her cottage, eyes wide with anticipation, but as they relayed their tale, her expression darkened. "You have glimpsed the truth, but the path is fraught with peril," she warned, her voice heavy with knowledge. "The piper is a master of illusion and despair. To find your children, you must be willing to face the darkness within yourselves." The parents felt the weight of her words settle upon them, a burden that would not easily be cast aside. Yet deep within their hearts burned a flicker of determination. They would not rest until they unraveled the piper's web of deceit and reclaimed the laughter that had been stolen from their town. But the question loomed ominously. What would it take to bring their children home, and would they be prepared to pay the price? Chapter 4. The Gathering Shadows. As the moon hung low in the sky, casting a silvery glow over Hamelin, Elara and the other parents convened once more in Greta's dimly lit cottage. The atmosphere was thick with tension, each heart beating like a war drum, echoing their collective desperation. They had glimpsed the darkness that lurked in the forest, and with it, the formidable figure of the piper, who thrived on their anguish and uncertainty. "Greta," Elara said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides, "what do we need to do to save our children? How do we confront the piper? We cannot allow him to keep them any longer." Greta leaned closer to the flickering fire, the flames dancing like spirits in the night. 2. Confront the piper is to understand the darkness that binds him, she replied, her tone grave. Legends speak of a pact made long ago, a debt owed to the shadows. He is not just a man, he is a keeper of secrets, a weaver of fates. The music he plays is the language of lost souls. The parents listened intently, each word striking a chord deep within them. "What do we need to know?" one father asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "First, you must gather those who have felt the piper's touch," Greta instructed. "Seek the families of other lost children, for their strength will bolster your own. Alone, you are vulnerable, but together, you are a force he cannot easily dismiss." Elara nodded, determination sparking in her chest. "We will do this. We will rally the families and stand united against the Piper's curse." As they left Greta's cottage, a chilling wind swept through the streets of Hamelin, carrying with it a faint echo of the Piper's melody, a reminder of what they were up against. The parents moved swiftly, seeking out others who had been touched by tragedy, their hearts heavy with the weight of loss and the hope of reclaiming what had been stolen. One by one, they gathered in a small clearing just outside the town, the air thick with a sense of impending confrontation. Elara looked around at the faces of the parents, each one etched with sorrow but also flickering with determination. She stepped forward, her voice rising above the whispering trees. "We are here to reclaim our children. We will not be silenced any longer. The Piper thinks he can control us, but together we are stronger." A murmur of agreement swept through the group as they formed a circle, their hands clasped tightly, their hearts beating as one. "We need to remember our children," Elara continued, her voice trembling with emotion. "Their laughter, their dreams, everything that made them who they are. That is the key to breaking the Piper's hold." They began to share stories, their voices rising and falling like a gentle tide. Each tale was a thread woven into a tapestry of love and remembrance, of birthday parties, of scraped knees and laughter echoing down the streets, of dreams yet unfulfilled. As they spoke, the air grew thick with the memories of their children, and a palpable energy began to swirl around them, a force ignited by love and determination. But in the darkness beyond the clearing, shadows began to shift and sway, drawn to the warmth of their gathering. The air grew colder, a bone-chilling breeze sweeping through the trees as the moonlight dimmed, obscured by dark clouds that rolled in like a tidal wave. A sinister presence loomed, and the parents felt the weight of the Piper's gaze upon them. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled, and a chilling laughter echoed through the clearing, reverberating off the trees. The Piper stepped forth, his figure emerging from the darkness, clad in a coat as vibrant as the nightmares that danced in the corners of their minds. "How quaint," he said, his voice smooth yet laced with malice. "You think you can gather strength in numbers? That your love will shield you from the inevitable?" Elara stood tall, refusing to be cowed by his presence. "We are not afraid of you," she declared, her voice unwavering. "We will do whatever it takes to bring our children home." The Piper tilted his head, a sinister smile creeping across his lips. "Ah, but there lies the folly of the heart. You do not understand the depths of my power. For every child you seek, I hold their laughter as currency, their memories as my ransom." His eyes gleamed with a malevolent light, reflecting the shadows that danced at his feet. "Your strength is admirable, but you have yet to grasp the true price of defiance. Your love binds you, but it can also break you." He gestured with a flourish, and the shadows at his command began to swirl, forming grotesque figures that twisted and writhed in the air. The parents recoiled, fear gripping their hearts once more. "We will not succumb to your darkness," one father shouted, but doubt flickered in the corners of his mind, mirroring the despair that crept in like a thief in the night. As the Piper's laughter echoed through the clearing, the shadows closed in, threatening to engulf them. In that moment of chaos, Elara felt a surge of strength rising from within, a flicker of hope ignited by the shared memories of their children. "Remember why we are here," she cried, her voice cutting through the darkness. "We fight for their laughter, for their joy. We will not let fear consume us." With renewed determination, the parents joined hands, their collective strength igniting a spark that pushed back against the encroaching shadows. The power of their love surged through them, a radiant light illuminating the clearing, pushing back the darkness. But the Piper's eyes narrowed, fury flashing within them. "You may have momentarily escaped my grasp, but the game is far from over," he warned, his voice dripping with menace. "I will return, and when I do, the price will be far steeper than you can imagine." With a final wave of his hand, the shadows recoiled, retreating into the depths of the forest. The parents found themselves alone in the clearing, the oppressive weight of fear lifting, if only for a moment. They were shaken but resolute, knowing that their fight was only beginning. Elara looked around at her fellow parents, their faces pale but determined. "We cannot rest. We must prepare for what lies ahead," she said, her heart racing with the urgency of their mission. "We must find a way to break the Piper's hold and rescue our children from the shadows." As they stood together in the clearing, the echoes of the Piper's laughter faded into the night, but the threat of his return loomed ever larger, a specter haunting their thoughts. They had glimpsed the darkness, but now they must delve deeper into the heart of the legend if they were to reclaim their children and banish the Piper from their lives forever. Chapter 5. Whispers of the Forest. In the days that followed the confrontation in the clearing, the parents of Hamelin were consumed by a singular purpose. Elara led them in organizing meetings in secret, their discussions woven with threads of fear, hope, and fierce determination. They gathered under the cover of darkness, speaking in hushed tones as the shadows danced around them, the haunting presence of the Piper lingering like a fog that refused to lift. "Tonight we venture into the forest," Elara declared one evening, her voice strong despite the uncertainty that gnawed at her heart. "We must understand the depths of this curse if we are to break it. We need to confront the Piper on his own ground." The parents exchanged wary glances, the forest's looming darkness casting a long shadow over their resolve. "But what if he finds us? What if we fall into his trap?" One mother whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Elara took a deep breath, drawing strength from the shared memories of their children that had fueled their unity. "We have faced him once, and we have survived. We are not alone. The power of our love is our shield. We must go, our children deserve no less." As the moonlight bathed the forest in an eerie glow, they stepped into the woods, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. Every rustle of leaves sent shivers down their spines, as if the trees themselves were whispering secrets of old. The deeper they ventured, the more they felt the weight of the Piper's malevolence pressing against them. With each step, Elara felt the ground beneath her shift, the darkness coiling around them like a serpent. The path ahead twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the heart of the woods, where the shadows thickened, threatening to swallow them whole. As they walked, memories of laughter echoed in Elara's mind, mingling with the fear that had become a constant companion. "Do you hear that?" one father suddenly murmured, halting in his tracks. The group paused, straining to listen. From deep within the woods came a faint, melodic sound, a haunting lullaby that tugged at their hearts, drawing them closer. "It's him," Elara whispered, the realization hitting her like a cold wave. "He's luring us in." Despite the trepidation coursing through them, the parents pressed on, guided by the siren call of the Piper's music. The notes danced through the air, twisting and curling like tendrils of smoke. It was beautiful, almost enchanting, and for a moment Elara felt the fear dissipate, replaced by a sense of longing, a desire to surrender to the music. "No!" she cried, shaking her head as if to dispel the seductive melody. "We must remain strong. Remember why we are here." She squeezed the hand of the mother beside her, drawing strength from their connection. As they approached a small clearing, the source of the music became clear. The Piper stood there, his form silhouetted against the shimmering light of the moon, the flute in his hands glinting ominously. He played with an otherworldly grace, the notes swirling around him like a spell, captivating and chilling. "Welcome back, dear parents," he greeted them, his voice smooth as silk yet laced with malice. "Have you come to join me? To dance in the moonlight and forget your burdens?" The parents stood their ground, their hands clasped together, defiance radiating from their unified front. "We have come to reclaim our children," Elara shouted, her voice ringing out through the night air. "We will not be your puppets, nor will we let you hold them hostage any longer." The Piper's laughter echoed through the trees, rich and haunting. Ah, but you misunderstand the nature of this game. Your children are not merely lost. They are part of a greater tapestry woven into the fabric of this world. Without them, you are but threads unraveling. Let me show you what I can offer. With a flourish, he lifted his flute once more, and the melody shifted a haunting lullaby that curled around them, weaving in and out of their consciousness. Elara felt her resolve waver, memories of her child flooding her mind, the joyful laughter, the innocent wonder, the promise of a future now stolen away. Fight it! A father yelled, breaking the spell that threatened to ensnare them. The parents began to chant the names of their children, their voices rising in a chorus that cut through the piper's enchantment. We remember. We remember. The piper's expression darkened, and the music faltered as he took a step back, anger flashing in his eyes. You think your love can overcome my magic? You are fools to think so. With a wave of his hand, shadows surged forward, morphing into grotesque shapes that lunged at the parents, seeking to shatter their resolve. Elara felt the shadows pressing against her, but she stood firm, channeling the love for her child into a barrier that held the darkness at bay. We are not afraid of you, she shouted, her heart pounding fiercely. You cannot take our love from us. With renewed determination, the parents formed a tighter circle, their voices rising in a rhythmic chant. The air shimmered with their combined energy, pushing back against the encroaching shadows. The piper's music faltered again, the shadows quaking as if caught in a tempest. You may hold some power, he hissed, his voice dripping with fury, but I will return, and I will reclaim what is mine. With one final, desperate push, the parents released a wave of light, a beacon fueled by their collective love and remembrance. The shadows recoiled, and with a resounding cry, the piper vanished into the night, his music dissolving into an echo that faded like a dream. Breathless and shaken, the parents stood in the clearing, their hearts racing with adrenaline and fear. They had faced the piper and lived to tell the tale, but the specter of his threat loomed larger than ever. Elara, one mother whispered, tears shimmering in her eyes. Will we ever see our children again? Elara looked at the group, her heart heavy yet resolute. We will find a way, she promised. This battle is far from over, but together we can forge a path to reclaim what is rightfully ours. As they began to make their way back through the forest, the moonlight pierced through the canopy, illuminating their path with a glimmer of hope. They had faced the darkness, and though the battle was far from won, they had ignited a fire within themselves, a determination that would carry them forward into the unknown depths of the piper's world. In the haunting silence of the forest, the echoes of their children's laughter lingered like a distant memory, a promise of hope waiting to be fulfilled. Chapter 6. The Gathering Storm. Days melted into nights, each one marked by an oppressive silence that hung over Hamelin like a dark cloud. Elara, though weary, found herself leading the remaining townsfolk in their preparations. The haunting absence of the children, coupled with the terrifying confrontation with the piper, spurred them into action. It was not merely about reclaiming their loved ones anymore. It was about standing up against a force that had threatened to tear their lives apart. Gathering in the town square, the parents convened once more, their faces etched with lines of determination and fear. Lanterns flickered in the twilight, casting dancing shadows on the cobblestones as they discussed their next steps. Tonight, we will send a message, Elara declared, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. We will call upon the spirits of our children. We must remind the piper that he is not the only one with power. Summoning spirits. One father questioned, skepticism lacing his tone. What if it angers him further? Or what if it weakens his hold? Another mother countered. We cannot sit idly by. We have to try. With a collective nod, they agreed to proceed, pooling their resources to create a ritual that would echo the love they held for their children. They scoured the woods for wildflowers, gathering them under the dim light of the moon. The blossoms would serve as a conduit for their message, each petal imbued with love and longing. As dusk fell, they ranged the flowers in a circle in the heart of the town square, the scent of earth and blooms filling the air. They formed a circle round the makeshift altar, holding hands and closing their eyes, their hearts beating as one. "Come to us, dear children," Elara began, her voice low yet firm. "Hear our call and know that we will not abandon you. Your light will guide us through this darkness." As they chanted softly, the air around them shifted, growing heavy with energy. The lanterns flickered violently, casting shadows that twisted and morphed, as if reflecting the struggle between light and darkness. The whispers of the forest danced in their ears, and for a moment the world around them faded, leaving only the bond they shared. Then a sudden chill swept through the square, snuffing out the lanterns and plunging them into darkness. Panic rippled through the group, but Elara held firm. "Stay focused. We must not waver," she urged, her heart pounding. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled, and from the earth rose ethereal figures, glowing with a soft, otherworldly light. The parents gasped, tears streaming down their cheeks as they saw the familiar shapes of their children. The spectral forms hovered above the circle, their expressions a mix of joy and sorrow, a reflection of the love that had drawn them there. "Mother! Father!" Both figures cried, their voices like whispers on the wind. "We are here. We hear you. Elara, we must hurry." A father shouted as the surrounding darkness thickened, shadows swirling menacingly at the edges of the light. "The piper is coming." At that moment, a chilling melody echoed through the square, the haunting notes of the piper's flute rising in a crescendo. The spectral figures began to flicker, their forms wavering like candle flames. "You must stop him," one of the children implored, their voice trembling. "He won't stop until he has us all." Elara felt a surge of desperation. "What can we do?" she pleaded, her eyes darting around for any sign of hope. "Take our love and use it as your weapon." Another child cried, their spectral form glowing brighter. "Together, you are stronger." The parents joined hands tighter, channeling their love into a unified force, weaving it into a shield that shimmered in the dark. The ground shook as the piper's music crescendoed, a discordant symphony that threatened to drown out their hope. Just then, the figures of the children began to rise, enveloped in a radiant light that pulsated with the rhythm of their parents' hearts. The shadows recoiled as if burned, revealing the outline of the piper emerging from the darkness, his eyes ablaze with fury. "Fools!" he roared, brandishing his flute as if it were a weapon. "You think you can challenge me? I will take every last one of you." With a deep breath, Elara stepped forward, channeling every ounce of her love and strength into her voice. "You may have taken our children, but you will not take our hearts. We are their light, and they are our hope." The energy surged within the circle, a wave of warmth that enveloped them all. The spectral forms of their children joined the parents, their collective spirit creating a dazzling display of light that clashed against the dark. As the piper raised his flute, ready to unleash his wrath, the parents launched forward, their hands outstretched. The combined force of their love met the piper's music in a brilliant explosion of light and sound. The world seemed to hold its breath, caught in the balance between darkness. For a moment, everything hung suspended, then a deafening crack filled the air as the two forces collided. The piper staggered back, the flames of rage in his eyes flickering as he realized the power of the parents' love was unlike anything he had ever faced. Elara felt the energy surging, and with one final cry, she channeled all her strength into their united front. "We will fight for our children." The light exploded outward, engulfing the piper and illuminating the dark corners of the forest. He howled in fury, the sound mingling with the cries of the parents and the whispers of their children. Shadows writhed and twisted as the light began to consume them, illuminating the truth of the piper's darkness. With a final surge, the light erupted, banishing the shadows and shattering the piper's power. In that moment, the town square erupted with brightness, and the figures of the children began to shimmer, fading slowly but leaving behind an indelible mark on the hearts of their parents. As the last notes of the piper's flute faded into silence, the parents stood together, gasping for breath, their hearts pounding with the realization of what they had achieved. They had confronted the darkness and had won a small victory, but the battle was far from over. Elara looked around at her fellow parents, their faces weary yet resolute. "This is just the beginning," she said softly. "We must prepare. The piper will return, and we must be ready." And as the moon shone brightly above them, illuminating the remnants of their ritual, the parents knew that together they would fight to reclaim their children and confront the darkness that loomed on the horizon. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. The dawn broke over Hamelin, painting the sky with hues of crimson and gold, yet an uneasy silence lingered in the air. The townsfolk gathered in the square, their eyes weary but resolute, each soul haunted by the remnants of the night's battle. Elara stood among them, feeling the weight of their collective determination pressing down like a heavy shroud. They had faced the darkness together, but the piper was still out there, lurking, waiting for the moment to strike again. Elara's thoughts swirled with the events of the previous night. The children's spirits had shown them the power of their love, but the victory felt fragile, as if it could slip away at any moment. She turned to her fellow parents, their expressions a mix of hope and fear. "We must fortify our defenses," she urged, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. "The piper will not let this defeat go unpunished. We need to gather our resources, create a plan, and stand united." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. They were no longer just parents, they were warriors, ready to fight for their children. With renewed purpose, they began to discuss strategies, pooling their knowledge and resources to prepare for the impending confrontation. As the day unfolded, the town buzzed with activity. Some parents ventured into the woods to gather herbs and materials for protective charms, while others worked to strengthen the walls of their homes, reinforcing them against the darkness they knew would come. The air was thick with determination and a hint of fear, yet an undercurrent of hope pulsed through their efforts. Elara took it upon herself to delve into the town's history, seeking answers in the dusty tomes of the town library. She combed through ancient texts, searching for references to the piper and the legends that shrouded him. She uncovered stories of past encounters, accounts of towns that had faced his wrath and survived, and the peculiar remedies that had been employed to banish him. One tale spoke of a group of brave villagers who had crafted a grand effigy of the piper using twigs, stones, and cloth. They adorned it with offerings of sweets and music, drawing the piper into a trap. Elara's heart raced at the thought perhaps this could be a part of their strategy. As night fell, the townsfolk gathered once more, their eyes reflecting the flickering lanterns like stars against the encroaching darkness. With Elara leading the charge, they discussed their findings, weighing the merits of the effigy and how they could use their love as a weapon. "We will create our own piper," Elara suggested, her heart pounding with the weight of her idea. "An effigy to lure him away from our children. We will surround it with music and flowers just as we did during the ritual. It will be a beacon drawing him in while we prepare for the final confrontation." Excitement coursed through the group as they set to work, gathering materials and crafting the effigy. The atmosphere buzzed with energy as they sculpted the figure, each stitch entwined a manifestation of their love and determination. As the night deepened, laughter mingled with the solemnity of their task, knitting them closer together in their shared goal. But as they toiled, the shadows around them seemed to stretch and grow darker, as if the very fabric of the night was alive with the malevolence of the piper. The air crackled with tension, and Elara felt a chill creep up her spine. It was as though they were being watched, the weight of unseen eyes pressing down upon them. Suddenly, a haunting melody floated through the air, soft at first but steadily growing louder. The parents froze, their hearts pounding in unison. The piper was coming. Gather around the effigy. Elara shouted, her voice cutting through the tension. We must stand together. They formed a protective circle around their creation, their hearts pounding in rhythm with the eerie tune that enveloped them. The effigy glimmered in the dim light, a beacon of hope amidst the encroaching darkness. The piper stepped into the clearing, his figure shrouded in shadows, eyes glinting with malice. He raised his flute to his lips, the haunting melody curling around them like smoke, ensnaring their senses. You think you can thwart me with this pitiful mockery? He sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. I have taken what is mine, and I will take it again. Elara stood firm, her heart racing. We will not let you have our children. We have learned the power of love, and we will fight for them. The piper laughed, a sound that sent chills through the parents. Love, what a foolish weapon. It is but a flicker in the darkness. With that, he raised his flute, and the air around them thickened, a palpable tension crackling like static electricity. The parents held their ground, channeling their love into a shimmering barrier that surrounded them, creating a protective cocoon against the dark magic of the piper. The music shifted, a sinister harmony that sought to invade their hearts and minds, but the love they had for their children surged within them, forming a powerful shield. The effigy began to glow, radiating warmth and light that pushed back against the encroaching shadows. Elara felt the energy of the town coursing through her veins, and with a fierce determination, she stepped forward, voice raised above the haunting melody. Your power is no match for the love we share. We will not be silenced. The piper's expression twisted in fury, the shadows around him swirling violently as he unleashed a storm of dark energy. The parents pressed closer together, reinforcing their barrier, their united strength weaving a tapestry of light that began to push back against the darkness. With one final surge, Elara raised her arms, channeling all her love and strength into a radiant beam of light that shot toward the piper. It struck him, a brilliant flash that illuminated the night and sent shockwaves through the very air. The piper stumbled back, his malevolence momentarily shattered, and Elara seized the moment. Now, surround him, she cried. The parents surged forward, the effigy glowing brightly in their midst, radiating warmth and love. They encircled the piper, the air thick with their collective determination, and began to chant the words of their ritual once more. Come, dear children, come back to us. The shadows writhed and twisted as the piper struggled against the light, his power waning under the strength of the parents' love. Elara could feel the spirits of their children drawing near, their presence a comforting warmth that filled her heart. And in that moment, amidst the chaos, a voice echoed through the clearing, a soft, familiar sound that carried the weight of hope. We are here. We are with you. As the parents united their voices in a crescendo of love, the effigy erupted in a burst of light, illuminating the darkness and banishing the shadows. The piper howled in rage, but the power of their love surged like a tidal wave, crashing against him with overwhelming force. The light enveloped him, consuming the darkness until he was nothing but a whisper in the night, banished by the love of the town that refused to yield. Breathless and trembling, Elara and the townsfolk stood together, their hearts racing as the echoes of the piper's fury faded into silence. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but the battle was not yet over. The piper may have been banished for now, but the scars of their encounter ran deep. As dawn began to break, casting soft rays of light over the town, Elara felt a flicker of hope ignite within her heart. They had reclaimed a piece of their children's spirit, but they still had much work to do. Turning to her fellow parents, she vowed, we will find a way to bring them back. Together, we will fight until our children are safe once more. And, as the sun rose over Hamelin, they stood united, ready to face whatever darkness lay ahead. Chapter 8, The Lure of Shadows. In the wake of their triumph, a fragile peace settled over Hamelin, yet the air was thick with a tension that belied the calm. Elara and the townsfolk poured their hearts into their efforts to restore normalcy, but whispers of the piper's return echoed through the village. Elara often found herself wandering through the quiet streets at dusk, her heart heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. Though they had cast the piper out, she felt a foreboding presence lingering in the shadows, as if he were waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. The children, though safe for now, were still lost in a realm of shadows, their laughter silenced by the piper's dark magic. One evening, as twilight cloaked the town in shades of indigo, Elara gathered the parents in the town square. The flickering lanterns cast eerie shadows that danced around them, and a sense of urgency filled the air. "We cannot become complacent," Elara began, her voice steady but laced with concern. "The piper may be gone, but he will not rest until he reclaims what he believes is his. We must find a way to bring back our children." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, but uncertainty hung in the air like a thick fog. "How? Do we fight something that feeds on our fears?" One parent asked, their voice trembling. "What if our efforts only draw him closer?" "We must confront our fears," Elara replied, determination shining in her eyes. "We have already faced the darkness together. We can face it again." They spent the next few nights gathering in secret, brainstorming ideas to reclaim their children's spirits. Elara suggested they delve deeper into the town's history, searching for ancient tales that could offer insight or wisdom. She believed the legends held the key to understanding the piper's nature and finding a way to counter his power. One stormy night, Elara discovered an old, tattered manuscript hidden in the library's archives. Its pages were yellowed and fragile, yet the words within seemed to pulse with a life of their own. The text recounted an ancient ritual, one that could some parents exchanged glances, their resolve beginning to solidify. One by one, they began to speak of their fears, the darkness that had crept into their hearts since the piper's arrival. They shared tales of sleepless nights and endless worry, of the laughter that had been snuffed out like a candle in the wind. Elara listened intently, her heart swelling with empathy for each soul present. "We will face these fears together," she reassured them. "We will not let the piper's darkness extinguish our love." As preparations began for the ritual, the townsfolk poured their hearts into every detail. They gathered flowers from the fields, weaving them into garlands that would adorn their gathering place. The lanterns flickered in the evening breeze, illuminating their path as they set to work. On the night of the ritual, the moon hung high in the sky, casting a silver glow over Hamelin. The townsfolk gathered in the clearing, their hearts pounding with a mix of fear and hope. Elara stood at the center, flanked by her fellow parents, their faces etched with determination. "Tonight, we call upon the spirits of our children," she declared, her voice resonating in the cool night air. "We summon their laughter, their joy, and their love to guide us through the darkness." As they joined hands, a palpable energy surged around them, weaving their hearts together in a tapestry of light. They began to chant the words of the ritual, their voices rising in harmony, filling the night with a melody that transcended fear. The air thickened, swirling with energy as shadows danced at the edges of the clearing. The piper's presence lurked just beyond the flickering lanterns, a haunting melody weaving through the air, taunting them with memories of lost laughter. But Elara stood firm, her heart beating in sync with the rhythm of the chant. The shadows writhed, drawn closer by the power of their united love. With each repetition of the words, the darkness began to recede, revealing glimpses of familiar faces, the lost children, their eyes shimmering with hope. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the clearing, extinguishing the lanterns one by one, plunging them into darkness. Gasps echoed among the parents, but Elara pressed on, her voice unwavering. "We will not be silenced. We will bring them home." As the last lantern flickered out, A brilliant light erupted from the center of their circle, illuminating the night. The shadows recoiled, revealing the spirits of the children, their laughter ringing like chimes in the wind. The piper's haunting melody faltered, replaced by the joyous sounds of their beloved children. The spirits danced around the parents, drawing them into a whirlwind of light and love. In that moment, Elara felt the weight of her fear lift, replaced by a fierce determination. The piper's darkness would not prevail. They were stronger together, united by a bond that could conquer even the most formidable shadows. But just as hope surged within her, the piper's furious laughter echoed through the night, a chilling reminder that the battle was far from over. The shadows coalesced, and the air crackled with tension as he materialized before them, a dark figure cloaked in malice. "Fools!" he sneered, his voice like ice. "You think you can summon the dead? I will claim what is mine." With a flourish of his flute, he unleashed a torrent of dark energy, aiming to snuff out the light that radiated from the parents. Elara's heart raced as she prepared to confront him, her voice steady as she rallied her fellow parents. "We will not let you take them again. Our love is stronger than your darkness." As they held their ground, the spirits of their children surged forward, their laughter intertwining with the parents' chants, creating a barrier of light that pushed against the piper's fury. The battle was on, a fierce clash between love and darkness, light and shadow, as Elara and the townsfolk faced the piper once more, determined to reclaim what had been lost and protect their children at any cost. Chapter 9. The Dance of Light and Shadow. The confrontation between the townsfolk and the piper escalated, the air thick with tension as light and darkness clashed in a spectacular display. Elara stood at the center, her heart pounding as the spirits of their children swirled around her, their laughter a beacon of hope amidst the encroaching shadows. The piper's dark figure loomed, his eyes glinting with malice, as he raised his flute to his lips. A haunting melody erupted, twisting through the air like a serpent, coiling around the parents and squeezing their resolve. Elara felt her heart race, the piper's magic wrapping around her like a cold embrace. But she refused to falter. Drawing upon the memories of her son's laughter and the warmth of his small hand in hers, she summoned every ounce of love and strength within her. "We are not afraid," she shouted, her voice echoing through the night, resonating with a power that defied the darkness. As if responding to her words, the spirits of the children surged forward, their joyful energy illuminating the night. The air shimmered with a golden light, pushing against the dark tendrils that sought to snuff it out. Each child's spirit, filled with the love of their parents, joined the fight, creating a vibrant tapestry of light that intertwined with Elara's chant. The piper's furious laughter echoed, but even he could not ignore the power of their collective love. "You think this will protect you?" he sneered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "Love is a weakness, a flicker that can be extinguished." Elara tightened her grip on her friend's hands, her heart steadying. "Love is our greatest strength. It is eternal, and it will shine brighter than your darkness." With renewed determination, they intensified their chants, their voices rising in harmony, creating a symphony of hope that reverberated through the clearing. The light grew stronger, illuminating even the darkest corners, pushing the shadows back inch by inch. But the piper was not easily defeated. With a wave of his hand, he summoned a tempest of darkness, a swirling vortex that threatened to engulf them all. The wind howled, chilling them to the bone, as if the very essence of despair was trying to sweep them away. In that moment, Elara realized they needed a focal point for their light, something to amplify their collective energy. "The heart of our town," she cried, pointing towards the ancient oak tree that stood sentinel in the clearing, its gnarled branches reaching for the sky. "We need to channel our love into the heart of Hamelin." As one, the townsfolk turned towards the tree, pouring their hearts and souls into the ritual. They envisioned their love, their memories, and their hopes intertwining with the ancient roots of the oak, grounding them in the very essence of their town. The piper, sensing their shift in focus, let out a roar of fury. He lunged forward, aiming to disrupt their concentration, but the spirits of the children danced with fierce determination, swirling around him like fireflies, drawing his attention away. The energy surged, the light pulsing with life as it connected with the tree. It began to glow, radiating warmth that filled the clearing. The ancient oak seemed to awaken, its bark shimmering as if it were a vessel of magic, ready to aid its people. As the townsfolk united their voices, the air vibrated with a harmonious chant that rose higher and higher, echoing through the night. The piper faltered, caught off guard by the power of their love. The shadows began to dissipate, revealing glimpses of the children's faces, their smiles radiant and full of life. "No!" The piper bellowed, desperation lacing his voice. He raised his flute again, summoning a final wave of dark energy, but it was too late. The combined force of love, laughter, and light was too strong. The piper's shadows quivered, retreating in fear as the brilliance of the oak illuminated the night. Elara and the townsfolk pressed on, their resolve unwavering. The laughter of their children intertwined with their chants, growing louder, echoing into the heavens. The ancient magic of Hamelin surged, enveloping them all in a protective cocoon of light. In a blinding flash, the shadows shattered, the piper's dark figure dissolving into nothingness as he was consumed by the very darkness he had tried to wield. The clearing erupted in a burst of shimmering light, the spirits of the children rising higher, free at last. As the light faded, the townsfolk fell silent, breathless and wide-eyed. Elara stood at the center, the energy of love and hope swirling around her like a warm embrace. She felt the presence of the children, their spirits now intertwined with the very heart of Hamelin. Suddenly, the first cries of joy erupted as the parents turned to one another, tears of relief streaming down their faces. "They're back!" a mother gasped, clutching her child, who had materialized beside her, blinking in the bright light of dawn. Elara's heart swelled with joy, watching as the children rejoined their families. Their laughter filled the air, a sound that had been missing for far too long. The bonds of love, once severed, had been restored, stronger than ever. As the sun began to rise, casting golden rays over the clearing, the townsfolk gathered around the oak tree, embracing one another. They had faced the darkness together, and together they had triumphed. Yet, amidst the celebration, Elara felt a whisper of uncertainty linger in the back of her mind. Though the piper had been vanquished, she knew that the scars of their experience would take time to heal. And as she looked into the horizon, a question loomed: was the battle truly over, or had they merely pushed the darkness away, waiting for another chance to return? With a heavy heart, she vowed to protect her town, knowing that the shadows would always be lurking just beyond the light. But for now they had each other, and together they would rebuild, united against the darkness that had once threatened to tear them apart. Chapter 10: Echoes of the Piper. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the town of Hamelin, a heavy fog rolled in, enveloping the streets in a chilling embrace. The townsfolk, still reveling in their victory over the piper, felt a strange unease settle in their hearts. Though the laughter of their children echoed through the air, an undercurrent of dread lingered, whispering of dark memories that refused to fade. Elara stood by the ancient oak tree, the site of their confrontation. It looked more ominous now, the twisted branches clawing at the sky, as if trying to escape something unseen. The warm glow of the dawn had given way to a cold, silvery light, and as night fell, a profound silence blanketed the town. In the heart of the gathering, a child's laughter broke the stillness, ringing clear and sweet. But then it happened, another laugh joined in, a darker, haunting echo that seemed to rise from the depths of the fog. The parents exchanged uneasy glances, their faces pale, as shadows flickered in the corners of their vision. "Did you hear that?" Elara asked, her voice trembling slightly. The townsfolk nodded, their joy replaced by a chilling sense of foreboding. As the fog thickened, a figure emerged from the darkness, a silhouette that sent shivers down Elara's spine. It was a child, pale and ethereal, its eyes wide and unblinking. But there was something unsettling about its presence, something wrong. The laughter faded, replaced by a mournful whisper that drifted on the wind. We played, we danced, we followed. The crowd gasped, realizing the truth. The piper had not truly been vanquished. Instead, he had woven himself into the very fabric of their memories, haunting them from the shadows, a phantom lurking just beyond their perception. Stay close. A father shouted, clutching his child's hand tightly as more figures began to materialize, ghostly children drifting into view, their expressions twisted in a ghastly mix of joy. They danced in circles, their laughter echoing, but it was not the sound of innocent play, it was a chilling mockery of what had once been. Elara felt the air grow heavy with despair. "What do you want?" she cried, her voice rising above the cacophony of laughter and whispers. "You're free. You shouldn't be here." The specters paused, their eyes turning toward her, hollow and empty. "Free?" One of them echoed, its voice a dissonant melody that reverberated through the air. "We are forever bound to the piper. We played his tune, and now we dance for eternity." A piercing scream shattered the night as one of the children fell to the ground, clutching their head in agony. The adults rushed forward, but as they reached out, the specters converged, their laughter morphing into a cacophony of cries that resonated with anguish and despair. "The piper will return," they chanted, their voices intertwining, growing louder, drowning out the cries of the parents. "He always returns." Panic erupted within the crowd as shadows stretched and twisted, coiling around them like living tendrils. The parents grabbed their children, attempting to flee, but the fog thickened, obscuring their vision, disorienting them. Elara's heart raced as she realized the piper had been waiting, lurking in the darkness, feeding off their fear. "Remember the tune," Elara shouted, trying to break through the chaos. "Remember the love that brought you home." But the spirits howled, drowning out her voice, pulling the townsfolk deeper into the fog. "We danced, we followed, we will always follow." As Elara fought against the shadows, she felt a cold hand grip her wrist. She turned to see the ghostly figure of her son, his face etched with sorrow. "Mother, you have to stop him. He will take more than just us." In that moment, clarity pierced through the chaos. Elara understood what she had to do. "We need to confront him, not flee," she yelled, her voice breaking through the din. "We must unite our strength and face the darkness together." Gathering her courage, she stepped forward, calling out to the spirits, "We love you. We remember you. You are not lost." The fog thickened, swirling violently around them, and the shadows danced closer. But Elara pressed on, feeling the warmth of her son's spirit next to her, fueling her resolve. "You are not bound to him. You can choose to be free." The shadows hesitated, flickering like candle flames in the wind. One by one, the spirits began to flicker and fade, as if the light of Elara's words reached through the fog, illuminating the path to freedom. But then, from the depths of the fog, a haunting melody filled the air, the piper's tune, twisted and grotesque, reverberating through the darkness. The laughter of children turned sinister, echoing in a cacophony that threatened to drown them all. "Flee! Flee!" a voice cried, but it was drowned out by the piper's music. Shadows leapt forward, grasping at the townsfolk, pulling them toward the dark. In that moment of chaos, Elara felt an ancient power stir within her. It surged through her veins, igniting a fire in her heart. "We are stronger together," she shouted, rallying the remaining townsfolk around her. With one last push, Elara channeled her love, her memories, and the strength of all the parents who had lost their children. The air crackled with energy as they sang, a chorus of defiance that shattered the piper's grip on their souls. The piper's music faltered, a moment of uncertainty creeping into his sinister laugh. "You think you can defeat me?" he hissed, his figure looming larger in the fog, darkness swirling around him like a storm. "I'm eternal. I will take what is mine." But as the townsfolk's voices rose, the fog began to recede, the light piercing through the darkness. The ethereal children, once filled with sorrow, turned their gazes toward Alara, their eyes shimmering with hope. "No!" the piper roared, desperation tinging his voice as he felt his power wane. "You cannot take them from me." With a final burst of unity, Alara and the townsfolk released their love into the night, their voices harmonizing in a crescendo of light. The ancient oak tree glowed with a brilliant light, casting away the shadows, revealing the piper for what he truly was, a wretched figure, consumed by his own darkness. In an instant, the fog dissipated, and with it, the piper's form began to unravel, a scream of rage echoing into the night as he was drawn into the light. The spirits of the children surged forward, merging with the warmth of love, their laughter rising as they too were freed from his grasp. As dawn broke, casting a golden hue over Hamelin, the townsfolk fell silent, breathless and awestruck. They had faced the darkness and triumphed, but at what cost? The memories of the lost children lingered in their hearts, a reminder of the shadows that could creep back at any moment. Alara stood by the ancient oak, now serene in the morning light, knowing that though they had defeated the piper, the echoes of his laughter would forever haunt their memories. As the spirits of the children faded into the light, Alara vowed to keep their memories alive, to ensure that love would always triumph over darkness, no matter how insidious it might become. The townsfolk gathered, their hearts heavy yet filled with hope. They had faced true horror and emerged stronger, their bond unbreakable. And as they looked to the horizon, they knew that the battle against the darkness would continue, but they would face it together, their love shining brighter than any shadow. With the rising sun illuminating the path ahead, Alara whispered a silent promise to the winds, one that would echo in the heart of Hamelin forever. "As long as love exists, we will never be alone.